Hi there, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in the East. When the history of the Biden presidency is written, the decisions made in the coming days about how to fight the coordinated, cynical, and frantic assault on voting rights in America by Republicans will be as consequential as any decision made about COVID or vaccines or foreign or domestic policy. These decisions will shape and determine whether we continue to live in a democracy. The Republicans are passing the most sweeping voting restriction laws in modern history. They will restrict access to the polls and criminalize election activity traditionally designed to educate voters and increase access to the polls for young voters or minority voters. According to the Brennan Center, 14 states have enacted 22 laws that will make it harder to vote. An additional 61 laws are advancing through 18 states. By far, the most insidious aspects of all these laws are the prescriptions for dealing with future allegations of voter fraud. The laws seek to disempower the kinds of nonpartisan election officials who held our fragile democracy together last December as Donald Trump and his allies bludgeoned it with lies about fraud and lobbied and strong-armed local election officials. Those efforts may have worked to overturn the result of the election if all of these GOP voter suppression laws had been in place back in November. Texas is the latest battleground, with Democrats in the legislature there buying national leaders some time over the weekend. But their brave actions will fail without federal legislation. Here's Beto O'Rourke on that topic.
Those Texas House Democrats that stopped this voter suppression bill, even though they are in a fairly deep minority here in Texas, I hope that Senate Democrats in the United States Senate, who are in a majority, are watching their example. These guys in Texas were able to stop a bad bill. We need the Senate Democrats in the United States Senate to pass a good one. They have the numbers to do it. When Democrats stick together, stand up and fight, we win. And I hope those Senate Democrats will do that while they have the chance.
The Senate Democrats and the White House now have a choice to make about how hard they want to fight for the one thing that would erase all of the GOP's efforts at eroding the hallmark of our democracy: free and fair elections. Texas Democrats are pleading with the president to do so.
We knew today, with the eyes of the nation watching actions in Austin, that we needed to send a message. And that message is very, very clear. Mr. President, we need a national response to federal voting rights.
President Biden over the weekend issuing a very strong statement in response to the Texas bill, calling on Congress to pass federal voting rights legislation. From that statement, quote, "It's part of an assault on democracy that we've seen far too often this year, and often disproportionately targeting Black and brown Americans. It's wrong and un-American. In the 21st century, we should be making it easier, not harder, for every eligible voter to vote." But many Democrats and activists still don't feel like that is enough. We have seen how successful this president can be at using his bully pulpit to garner support for legislation. We saw it with his COVID relief package, and we're seeing it now with infrastructure. If this White House does not turn its full focus to federal legislation to undermine the state voter suppression laws, masquerading as election integrity laws, there's a distinct possibility that this country will take its largest leap away from the democratic ideals that hold it together. The fight that has come to the president's doorstep over voting rights in America is where we start this hour with some of our favorite reporters and friends. MSNBC political analyst, my friend, the former Senator Claire McCaskill is here. Also joining us, Jason Johnson, politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University, and MSNBC and a contributor to MSNBC and The Griot. And Matthew Dowd is here, political strategist and founder of Country Over Party. Matthew Dowd, you inspire a lot of my thinking on this. I want to start with you over Texas, where all of the heat was around this issue over the weekend, but it is not the only battleground. Texas Governor Abbott saying he'll veto Article 10 of the budget passed by the legislature. Article 10, of course, funds the legislative branch. No pay for those who abandon their responsibilities. Stay tuned. Of course, they did not abandon their responsibilities. The Democrats in the Texas legislature very much holding up their obligations to their constituents and the voters. But this is how bullies and autocrats, frankly, play.
Well, good to be here, and it's unbelievable being here in Texas at this moment in time. I mean, what's amazing to me is Governor Abbott and other governors around the country have actually stepped up Donald Trump's autocracy movement in the course of this. The idea, because Governor Abbott didn't get his voter suppression bill, which elements of, we could go through if you want, but elements of are just completely outrageous, that he then wants to basically get rid of the legislative branch. Now, he can't do that through the Texas Constitution, and that'll be obviously if he tries his pushback. He can't do it through the U.S. Constitution, but it's wholly undemocratic that what's going on here. It's almost as if Texas watched Georgia and Arizona, and the Texas GOP said, hold my Shiner Bock. We got more to do. And it's just a complete movement down away from democracy. But this is as clear an example of another step towards autocracy and another step away from democracy. And you know, I've said this many times with you over the last month. I think Joe Biden's heart's in the right place. I don't think much of the leadership of the Democratic Party and Joe Biden is doing near enough. This is the fundamental issue of our time. It's probably been the fundamental issue since Abraham Lincoln got elected in 1861. This is an assault on democracy, and I don't know how any other issue can be debated, compromised, or whatever if this sits on the table and this is going on. This should be a 4-alarm fire, all engines on deck, everybody to the barricades. We got to do this. And I think that maybe the president has some secret plan that I'm unaware of, but until that is done, until he says, I'm putting everything else on hold, everything else I want to do is on hold, including infrastructure, until we get this done.
Karine Jean-Pierre, Deputy White House Press Secretary Jason Johnson did say today, I believe she's traveling to Tulsa with the president, that he would have something to say on voting rights. We should also make clear that the reason the federal legislation is so urgently needed is that it is the only thing that would undermine the nearly 400 voter suppression laws. It is like the COVID vaccine, 100% effective at keeping the sick democracy from becoming severely ill or hospitalized with these laws. The federal legislation would protect against all of these bills, which even Republicans will concede are based on a lie. Most Republicans. There was no voter fraud. But Matthew makes a good point. We should go through what's in this Texas law because the specifics are more devastating than the spirit in which it was passed based on a lie. What the Texas bill does, and we should also be clear that the Texas law will eventually be passed. What the Democrats did was walk out and prevent it from being passed over the weekend. But Republicans hold a supermajority there. The Texas law targets voting methods used widely by Black and Latino voters in Houston. Almost all of the measures only target the large urban centers. It bars Sunday morning get out the vote programs used to mobilize churchgoers, largely Black churchgoers. It includes language reminiscent of Jim Crow laws and early versions of the bill. This is, in some ways, the most brazen sort of discrimination in voter suppression. Jason Johnson.
Yeah, Nicole, and here's what makes it even worse. It is, as usual, a solution to a problem that was created by the Texas legislature, right? Because if you look at local news, they're like, this is all about Harris County. That's it. It's all about Harris County. And what did we see happen during COVID, during the 2020 election in Harris County? You saw instance after instance of Republicans in the state of Texas trying to cut the number of voting locations. You wouldn't have to have 24-hour voting if you actually gave people enough voting locations. You wouldn't have to have so many mail-in ballot situations if you gave people adequate voting locations, if you gave them enough adequate and functioning voting machines. So Republicans keep creating a problem, then claiming it's a problem, and then trying to come up with a solution that really only helps them. But I agree, and I have been saying this alarm all along. I don't think Joe Biden gets it. I'm not even going to be as careful as some other people. He doesn't get it. He does. I don't care about infrastructure, to be perfectly honest with you. I care about the fact that we have a certain window in which to put in some of this legislation to protect people's ability to vote, because state legislatures can move faster than the federal government. We've got a window till maybe sometime later on this year to put these laws into place, put a federal floor into place as to how voting should work so it can possibly be counteracted by next summer. If they don't do this until sometime next year, it is a very, very high likelihood that courts will say it's not enough time for these laws to be changed and time for the election, and Democrats will lose both the House and the Senate in 2022 if Joe Biden, Joe Manchin, and Kristen Sinema don't get serious about voting rights.
You know, Claire, I want to be fair to this White House. Ron Klain said on this program on Friday that they'll have something to say about this soon. Karine Jean-Pierre reiterated that today. This president has a 62% approval rating. Turns out that protecting the country from the coronavirus is the right thing to do, and it's very popular. And I see this the way Jason and Matthew Dowd see this. I want to play something that a Texas legislature had to say about your former colleagues in the Senate.
You know, down here in Texas, we'd say when times get tough, it's time to cowboy up. And so with all due respect, I'd ask Senator Manchin to please cowboy up and understand that you may not think you don't want to destroy the country, but they're going to destroy the country state by state with these harsh voter suppression tactics. This is very, very tough.
Let me be even more explicit than that. They're not going to destroy the country for them. I feel like Bruce Willis in The Sixth Sense. He saw dead people. I see Republican fanaticism, and that's what this is. The Republicans view the voter suppression push as existential. They will not and cannot win, especially, I mean, there's a reason Georgia went first. There is a reason Texas is being shored up, because Beto got way too close to Ted Cruz, and they want to kill all those stories about Texas turning purple. So for Republicans, this is it. They're not trying to fix bridges. They're not trying to vaccinate Americans. They're not trying to stop people from any other problems. They're simply trying to stop the kinds of voters who never vote from them from voting. And they're trying to do it before the midterms. There's a reason this is happening so fast. There's an election for 2 years. And this is what every state legislature has taken up first. With that as the reality of the voter suppression laws, what say you about the filibuster and the White House posture?
Well, I agree with everyone that Joe Biden needs to use his bully pulpit to defend our democracy that is clearly under assault. Now, I can argue whether or not it's a good strategy for a political party to say our main plank, the thing we believe in most, is trying to keep people from voting. I'm not sure that in the long haul is going to help them, because everyone gets it. Everyone sees what they're doing. They're doing this in plain sight. Now, the other thing they're doing, as you and I discussed earlier today, that is really scary, and this is where I think Joe Manchin will pay attention, is where legislatures are trying to change state constitutions to remove the power of elected officials to stand up for the rule of law. They are trying to basically take the power away from secretaries of state to run elections in their states. And that's what they're elected to do. And by the way, Joe Manchin was Secretary of State of West Virginia. He understands that part. So I do think that there will be tremendous pressure put on every Democrat to try to fashion a bill that will, at a minimum, avoid a very long, protracted court battle for some of this nonsense that they're passing in the state legislatures. I do think the courts will be, where we can stop a lot of this, because a lot of it is on its face nutty and unconstitutional. Right. But that takes time, as you know, Nicole. So in the short run, getting a bill through the Senate that will protect some basic things, like if the people elect a Secretary of State, they have the power to run an election.
Claire, I have 37 follow-up questions, but I want to tell our viewers what they're seeing on their stage. President Biden has taken the stage. He's in Tulsa he's the first president, I believe, to travel to Tulsa to commemorate the race riots there. As soon as he takes the podium, we will listen in. But I want to ask you quickly, Claire, what is Mitch McConnell blew up the filibuster to pack the courts with extreme right-wing judges. Why not protect voting rights? Why not blow up the filibuster for something more noble than that?
Well, I think there's ways that filibuster can be changed. Listen, don't start yelling at me, everybody. Do not start on Twitter or anywhere else saying that I'm for the filibuster.
I would never yell at Claire.
I know you wouldn't yell at me. I'm talking about all those folks out there. They're going to think I'm trying to defend those people that are protecting the filibuster. But I will painfully remember what Donald Trump and the Republicans that control the House and the Senate tried to do in the first 2 years of his administration. I remember our ability to block it, our ability to stop the crazy, a lot of the crazy in the first 2 years. So members of the Senate are worried about that. On the other hand, if the Republicans actually have the nerve to go this far and say that the federal government has no role in protecting constitutional rights to vote, then I think you've got a different situation that is going to bring about a change in the cloture rules at a minimum. And I'm not going to go into the Byzantine rules of the Senate and how a filibuster is not really a filibuster. It's 60 votes to end debate. But the bottom line is, I think you will see something move or something blow up in the next 30 to 60 days.
Nicole?
Go ahead.
And I just want to say two things. I mean, I think Claire's right. It's not a good platform to run on restricting voters' rights. But the problem is the Republicans are making this crass political equation, which is, even though we know it's a negative, we're going to restrict so many people from voting, it'll overcome the negative part of this. And in the short term, exactly. I fear that they're going to be highly successful in this. And part of the reason they're doing it is not only to win elections, so they're not held accountable for unpopular policies. Think in Texas. We took restrictions off handguns in this legislative section. They passed a heartbeat abortion bill, which doesn't allow women to have a choice after 6 weeks. And they're about to try to ban transgender rights in the states. And they're doing all of that simultaneously, taking a voter's ability. This is not just a Democratic issue. This is an issue for all voters, because what they're doing is saying, we want to do stuff that you don't like, and you're not going to be able to hold us accountable. That's what they're doing in the short term. And I think in the long term, 10 years from now, will our democracy be okay? I hope so, I think. But in the short term, the amount of damage they're doing to our country is immense.
We are going to listen now to President Biden, who has just stepped up to the podium in Tulsa to deliver remarks commemorating the massacre in Tulsa 100 years ago. Let's listen.